Hello, lovely students. Welcome to my lessons on user-defined methods. Today we're going to be looking at subroutines in Delphi programming. So what are subroutines? It is a group of program statements. It's like you're taking a big program and subdividing or breaking it up into smaller subprograms. In object-oriented programming, a subroutine belongs to an object, and that object we call methods. And a method can either be a function or a procedure. Why would I want to break down a program into smaller subsections? 1. It promotes modular programming. And in writing code in segments, it then becomes easier to read, easier to understand, and you can separate the tasks that you wish to do into smaller subsections. In this way, the program becomes easier to understand, easier to debug. You can find errors easy and quickly. You can also update and modify your code. It prevents the repetition of code. Code can be reused by calling the same function or procedure multiple times. And this way, it makes your programming more efficient. Thus far in programming, you have learned a variety of procedures and functions in the many different sections you have learned from grade 10. So we have two types of methods. As I said to you, a method could either be a procedure or a method could be a function. So to date, you have learned predefined procedures and functions that are built into the Delphi program. So let's look at some of the predefined procedures that we have learned. The first one is the clear procedure. All it's doing, it's clearing the GUI component called a tmemo. It can also be used to clear a rich edit. And remember that the procedure is called by its name and it does not return a value. The second example is the set focus procedure. Here the set focus is to take the cursor back to the t-edit and allow the user to input a value. Show message, we use it all the time. We display a message in a dialog box. Note, all it's doing is it's displaying something, it's not returning a value. When you study text files, we spoke about write and writeLin. We also spoke about read and readLin. Write and writeLin will write data to a text file, and read and readLin will read data from a text file. So that was procedures that we used. We also used inc. Remember using inc and dec? Both are procedures. Inc will increment a value by 1, dec will decrement a value by 1. Note how a procedure again is called just by its name. In string handling, we used insert and delete. And we called insert and delete with parameters. The variable I want to insert, my starting position, and how many characters. The delete procedure, the variable I want to delete from, the starting position, and how many characters I want to delete. We then used assign file and reset, readline and rewrite. These are the procedures we used very recently in text files. Assign file created the link between the logical file and the physical file. Reset took the file pointer to the beginning of the file and prepared the file for reading from the file. We use read line to read from the logical file from memory into a variable. And we used rewrite to write data to a file. So these were all some of the built-in procedures as part of the Delphi programming language. Let's now look at built-in functions. Remember, a function performs a task, returns a single value. String to int, we've used it so often. Did you realize that it was a function? So all string to int did was take the input from the user via the edit box and convert it into an integer. We used SQR, SQRT, we used round and random range, and all these functions we used in the math unit. So SQR, all it did was return the square of the value stored in inum. And because it is a function, when it is called, it returns a value and stores it in a variable. So in this instance, it's returning the square of inum and storing it in a variable called r square. In the second example, SQRT again finds the square root of inum, returns the value, the square root of the number, in a variable called r root. So when a function is called, it is always called with another statement. Again, when a function is called, it is always called with another statement. And remember that a function returns a single value. Round, another function that we're very familiar with from the math unit. It's going to round the value and store it in a variable. The next one is random range. Random range, a function that returns a randomly generated value. In this instance, it's going to generate a value between 0 and 10, both inclusive, and random range will return the random value generated and store it in a variable called iran. In string handling, we learned length. Length returned the number of characters in a string, and the return value will be of data type integer because it will tell us how many characters in that string variable. We learned copy. Copy extracts part of a given string. So I'm going to copy from sname starting at position 1 and take 3 characters. And copy is going to return just that extracted string, and it's going to store it in a variable called stemp. Pos, another function, finds the position of a searched character or substring in a variable, in a string. So sline is of data type string. I'm going to find the position of the hash in the string. Remember pos. If it does not find the position of a searched character or substring, it will return -1. So pos, another function, returns a single value, and it will return it as data type integer. EOF. Recently we spoke about EOF and we used it widely in text files. And what does EOF stand for? End of file marker. So while it's not the end of the file, do something. So remember EOF, another function. Float to string. When we're formatting a decimal value, we convert it to string because I need to display it on a rich edit that will accept data type text, lines of text. So float to string, another function. Very widely used an input box. Did you realize that an input box was a function? I'm using a function to get a value, and that value is going to be of data type text, and another function, string to int, to convert it into a number and store it into an integer variable. So we have been using procedures and functions that are built into the Delphi programming language quite widely. But did you know that you could create your own functions and procedures? Just like the developers have created set focus, show message, ink and deck, or perhaps a function sqr or sqrt or copy or pos, you as a programmer can create your own functions. We call those functions user-defined functions, created by you, the user, custom-made specifically for you. You as the programmer can write your own functions and procedures. You can create those functions and procedures from scratch. And this allows you the flexibility to create any function that is workable for you. If you need something to do in a calculation, write a function. And you can call that function many times, and it will prevent repetition of code. It'll make your program easier to understand, more readable, easier to debug. And you know that subroutines are the breakdown of a large program into a smaller subsections, and we call those subsections procedures and functions. So we spoke about procedures and functions. So what is a parameter? A parameter is a value that is brought into a procedure or is brought into a function. Again, a parameter is a value that is brought into a procedure or a value that is brought into a function. But did you know that I could write a procedure and a function without bringing in any parameters? Let's take a look how we do this. So in my first example, I'm using the clear procedure. And the clear procedure has no parameters. All it's doing is clearing the GUI component to do display, which is your memo. In this example, random is a function, and random is going to return a floating number, and it has no parameters. So I can write a procedure or a function without any parameters. Let's look at the second example. In my second example for a procedure, ink is going to increment the value of I count by 1. The value that is stored in the variable I count is the value that is the variable that is going to be incremented by 1. So I am bringing in a value into this procedure. This value that is being brought into the procedure is called an actual parameter. Let's look at an example for a function. In this example, I'm using random range. And I'm generating a random number between 1 and 10, both inclusive. Remember when I use random range, this is my lower limit value, and this is my end index plus 1, or your upper limit value plus 1. So if I want to generate a random number between 1 and 10, it's going to be 1, 11, always one more than your end index. So this is my actual parameter being brought into my function random range. And random range, because it's a function, is going to return the one generated random number between 1 and 10, both inclusive. And it's going to store it in a variable called iRand to store the random number. Thank you, students, for listening. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and follow me on many, many videos to come on this section.